dying world, a lone scavenger crashes into silence, only to find something the Empire thought they buried forever. A dragon, not born, but built, wounded, furious, and chained by its past. But when a human reaches out instead of running, a spark ignites, not just of survival but of rebellion. This isn't just a story about fire, it's about choosing what to burn for. And when the Empire returns to claim its weapon, it discovers the weapon has chosen a side. If you are new here then, please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. The wind howled like a broken engine across the dusty ridges of Dusk Rift Canyon. Red sand mixed with ash swirled in the air, coating everything in a dull, rusted glow. Above the broken surface, a small shuttle limped through the sky, trailing smoke and sparks. Its hull was dented, its wings cracked, and its pilot was running out of both air and hope. Kieran Vale, a lone scavenger and engineer, clung to the controls with white knuckles. His ship was dying, systems failing one by one, warnings blinking across the console like a countdown. He didn't curse or panic. He'd flown worse ships. He just needed a place to land before gravity took the choice from him. Kieran spotted a rocky plateau below, flat enough to risk a crash. He yanked the stabilizer into a hard turn and aimed for it. The shuttle groaned in protest, one final push. Then it hit. The impact shook the ship, throwing sparks from the control panels. Smoke hissed from under the floor. The power core gave a last flicker and went out. Kieran sat in silence for a moment, heart pounding. Then he unstrapped himself and grabbed his toolkit. Well, he muttered, could have been worse. The sky outside was dim with red haze and the ground shimmered from heat and static dust. He stepped out into the open air, where the wind bit at his skin like tiny needles. His rebreather clicked on, filtering the thin air as he scanned the landscape. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. It was the kind of place only fools or the dying wandered into. He walked slowly, eyes searching the horizon. There were always scraps to find in places like this: fallen drones, broken satellites, lost cargo. Anything to keep a man like him alive one more day. But then he heard something. Not wind, not metal. A sound deeper than both. Breathing, slow, heavy, painful. Kieran froze. He turned toward the noise, stepping carefully over cracked stone and slag. The ridge nearby had been hit recently, the earth still warm, blackened by a fresh impact. Smoke curled from a crater not far ahead. Kieran moved closer, one step at a time. He checked his HUD. A life signal, strong, not faint like a scavenger on his last breath. Something alive. Something big. What he saw when he reached the edge of the crater stopped him cold. Lying broken in the ruins was a beast unlike anything he had ever seen. A dragon, if such things were real. It was massive, black and gold scales like burned armor, wings torn and twisted, one eye swollen shut. It bled from deep gashes across its chest, steam rising from wounds that should have killed anything else. Its breath came slow and loud through sharp, jagged teeth. Kieran didn't move. He didn't run. He stared, and the dragon stared back. Its remaining eye was silver, slitted, bright like molten metal. It watched him, not with hunger but with something else. Weariness. Pain. Something that had been hunted, not just injured. Kieran dropped to one knee, ignoring the radiation warnings flashing in his visor. He didn't get closer. He just looked at it. "You're not from around here," he said quietly. The dragon bared its teeth, a sound rising in its throat that could have been a growl or a groan. "Yeah, me neither." Kieran opened his toolkit slowly and pulled out a small scanner. Easy now. From a safe distance, he ran a full diagnostic sweep. What came back didn't make sense. The creature's body was part organic, part machine, engineered, enhanced, built for war. No wonder it looked like a weapon. It was one, and someone had left it here to die. He should have walked away. He had no backup, no working ship, and barely enough oxygen to last another day. But Kieran Vale didn't move. Instead, he opened his case wider and began his work. He sealed the worst of the dragon's wounds with regenerative foam. He stitched gashes with thermal thread. He used scraps from his broken shuttle to reinforce the beast's damaged wing. The dragon didn't resist. It growled softly, too weak to protest, too proud to beg. Kieran worked for hours until the sun sank below the horizon and the wind went still. He collapsed beside the beast, shaking with exhaustion. The dragon was breathing, steady now, not healed but no longer dying. Kieran looked up at the shattered moon above, then at the creature beside him. "Don't die on me," he whispered. "I'm too tired to bury you." The dragon blinked once, slowly. Then, against all odds, it closed its eye and rested. The shuttle behind them sparked once and went dark forever. No rescue would come, no help would arrive. But the dragon was alive, and somehow that mattered. Kieran had no way off this world, no working tools beyond what he carried. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. And something in that broken, fire-marked beast made him believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The wind carried less sting the next morning, though the air was still thin and sharp. Kieran Vale woke stiff and cold, his back aching from hours spent slumped beside the dragon. The creature, no, Theon, he decided, still lay motionless, chest rising slowly. Ash dust had settled on its dark gold scales, softening their sharp lines. Kieran rubbed his eyes and reached for his scanner. He needed to know how bad the damage really was. The scan blinked to life. Vital signs, faint but stable. Internal bleeding had slowed. Organ systems were repairing, some with strange efficiency, as if Theon's body had backup protocols for healing itself. Kieran had seen a lot of strange things in his years scavenging for parts across dead systems, but nothing like this. Theon wasn't just alive, he was built to stay that way. Whoever created him hadn't designed a pet or a tool. They had forged a survivor. Kieran didn't know why he kept helping. Maybe it was the way Theon had looked at him. Tired, proud, silent. Or maybe Kieran had just seen too many things fall apart in his life to leave something else behind. Either way, he got to work again. He reinforced the brace he had built for Theon's twisted wing, using scrap from a downed escape pod half buried nearby. He rerouted his own power core to feed heat into Theon's body, slowing the stiffness that came from damage. It cost him energy and time. But every hour Theon breathed a little deeper. Every day he shifted a little more. Kieran scavenged from a nearby wreckage field, pulling cables, med gels, and an old ration pack meant for machine-augmented tissue. It wasn't food, not really. It tasted like wet plastic and salt. But Theon swallowed it with a growl and didn't spit it out. Kieran chuckled. "Not gourmet, I know," he muttered, brushing dust from the dragon's side. Theon's eyes narrowed, but he didn't strike. That was enough of a thank you. On the third night, something changed. Kieran was tinkering with the rebreather unit, trying to squeeze more hours of oxygen from the filters when he heard shifting. He turned to see Theon trying to rise. Muscles trembled. One leg pushed forward, then another. The brace creaked as he put weight on it. Kieran stood watching silently. Theon got halfway up before collapsing again. Dust rose around him in a cloud. Kieran ran forward, afraid something had broken. But Theon just grunted, frustrated but not in pain. "You're trying too soon," Kieran said, stepping closer. "You'll tear something." Theon didn't respond, of course, but there was something in his breath, a slow, steady rhythm that felt more like determination than desperation. Kieran reached out and touched the dragon's side. The heat was still there, pulsing, but it didn't burn him. Theon's body temperature was deadly to most things, yet somehow it held back when he was near, another mystery he couldn't explain. That night, while the stars blinked coldly above and the broken moon lit the ridge in red, Kieran sat beside the dragon and spoke out loud. He talked about his life before, about the mining colonies, about being a fixer for machines people forgot, about how he'd once believed the Empire could be good before he saw what it did to people like him. He didn't expect an answer, but Theon listened. His great head tilted slightly. His tail twitched now and then, not out of pain but thought. Kieran looked at him. "You were made to fight," he said softly. "But I don't think that's all you're meant for." The next morning, Kieran woke to Theon standing. The dragon's legs shook and the wing brace bent slightly under pressure, but he was upright, tall, whole. Kieran stared, half in awe, half in fear. Theon didn't roar or fly. He just stood there, golden eye blinking slowly as if to say, "I'm not done yet." Kieran stepped closer slowly. "Well, look at you," he whispered, still breathing, still burning. He spent the next several days rebuilding, not just repairing. He scavenged stabilizers from old fighter jets and used them to form a frame for Theon's damaged wing. He stitched cables through the supports like tendons, feeding power cells into the framework. It wasn't pretty, but it might fly, someday. All the while, Theon followed him. Not like a pet, and not like a guard, more like a partner. When Kieran walked, Theon walked. When Kieran stopped, Theon waited. They didn't speak, but they understood each other. Pain had built something between them that words never could. By the end of the second week, Kieran stood on a ridge overlooking the canyon and saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. The possibility of a future. He turned to Theon, who now stood fully, his wings, one still half metal, half scar, tucked, close to his sides. Kieran smiled. "You're going to need a name," he said. "Can't keep calling you Hay forever." Theon looked at him unblinking. Kieran thought for a moment, then nodded. "Theon," he said. "It means flame that survives." The dragon didn't growl, didn't snarl. He lowered his head just slightly, as if to accept it. For the first time in years, Kieran Vale wasn't alone. He had no working ship, no radio, no contact with any living soul. But he had Theon, and together, they weren't just surviving anymore. They were rising from the ashes. The air was still when the sky cracked open. Kieran Vale had just finished tightening the last joint on Theon's wing harness, a frame built from old stabilizers and reinforced power cells. The dragon stood beside him, taller now, stronger, moving with a confidence that hadn't been there just a week ago. The desert wind rolled past, warm and dry, carrying only silence, until it didn't. A sharp hum tore through the canyon. Kieran froze. His scanner blinked red. 3 signals, fast, armed. He looked up. 3 ships appeared in formation, dropping out of the clouds like knives, sleek and silver, with crimson stripes along their sides, the mark of reclamation hunters. Imperial ships. Kieran's stomach turned cold. They had come. Not for him. For Theon. But they hadn't expected the dragon to be standing. Theon lifted his head, eyes locked on the incoming threat. No growl, no roar, just fire building low in his chest. Kieran dropped the tool in his hand and ran toward the comm rig, yanking a small transmitter off the half-broken console. "Time to move," he muttered, already climbing the ridge. Theon followed, wings flaring once before folding tight again. Ready. The first ship made its move. It dove low and fast, launching a barrage of stun nets and non-lethal plasma bolts. They weren't here to kill. They were here to capture. Kieran saw the pattern. Aimed shots, predictable timing. They wanted Theon alive, bound, returned. That made them dangerous. Theon didn't wait. He pushed off the ridge, kicking up dust and rock, and met the ship head-on. His rebuilt wing creaked, stabilizers buzzing to life. He wobbled in flight but didn't fall. A blast of searing blue flame exploded from his mouth, slamming into the side of the hunter ship. Metal melted. Theon's claws followed, tearing through the wing. The ship twisted midair, lost control, and slammed into the cliff below in a wave of fire. Kieran shielded his face from the blast, shouting into his comm, "One down!" The second hunter ship responded immediately. Its arc cannons opened fire. One blast clipped Theon's side, sending sparks and smoke from the actuator joint. He dropped briefly, body spiraling. Kieran's heart stopped. But Theon caught himself, wings flaring with effort, and pulled back into the sky. He roared, a sound like thunder torn in half. Kieran didn't need sensors to know that roar carried miles. Theon struck back hard. He climbed, flipped, and dove, more machine than beast, now flames shooting in tight streams. He was faster than the ship expected. His fire slammed into its engines, and the second hunter fell in a burst of steam and light. The impact sent shockwaves across the canyon. Kieran felt them in his chest. The last ship didn't attack. Instead, it hovered high and broadcast a message. To the unauthorized handler of asset D-47, you are in violation of Imperial protocol. Surrender the creature for immediate reclamation. Kieran climbed to the top of the ridge, gripping his transmitter. He's not your asset, he replied, calm and steady. Not anymore. The ship adjusted position, lining up weapons. Oh, second voice followed, this one colder. Theon, return. Your pain will be lessened. Kieran looked at the dragon standing beside him now, burned but unbroken, breath steaming in the dry air. He didn't move. He just looked to the sky, eyes glowing silver, fire cracking across his chest like veins of light. Kieran stepped back. Let's finish it. Theon launched again, straight into the sun. The ship fired everything it had, rockets, stun beams, even a disruptor grid, but none of it touched him. He moved like rage wrapped in steel. He spun once, then dropped from above, his body a flaming spear. His claws tore through the cockpit. The ship didn't fall. It exploded. Silence followed, thick and final. Kieran jogged down the ridge, heart racing, lungs burning. He found Theon limping through the smoke, wing actuator sparking from damage, breathing heavy. Kieran placed a hand on his shoulder, sweat dripping down his face. You okay? Theon huffed and pressed his head lightly against Kieran's chest. It was the first time he had ever done that. Kieran laughed, short and breathless. Yeah, me too. Later that night, while patching the damaged actuator, Kieran received a new signal. Not an attack, something different. A message from a long-range outpost, leaked footage, broadcasts. Someone had seen the fight. Someone had recorded it. And they were sharing it. The Empire's secret wasn't secret anymore. A man and a dragon who wasn't supposed to exist had taken down 3 Imperial hunters and survived. The footage spread through old channels, pirate, feeds, even black market traders. Kieran's name didn't appear, but Theon's did. D-47, prototype weapon, discarded, reclaimed, freed. Kieran looked at the dragon now resting beside the cliff, his golden black body dim under the moonlight. They're going to come harder next time, he said. They won't risk just hunters. They'll send something bigger. Theon didn't move, but Kieran knew he understood. They weren't just fugitives now. They were a message. Kieran stood, the stars reflecting in his eyes. They built you to obey, he whispered, but you chose something else. And with that, fire without chains burned brighter in the dark. The stars above the canyon had never looked so still. Kieran Vale stood beside Theon at the cliff's edge, a quiet wind brushing across his face as both watched the sky. It had been weeks since they had brought down the last of the Empire's hunter ships. Since then, whispers had grown across distant systems, whispers of a dragon that had broken free, and the man who helped him rise. Those stories spread like fire, lighting sparks in forgotten corners of the galaxy. But Kieran knew the silence wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that meant something bigger was coming. That morning, the sky finally broke again. Sensors flared red, lighting up the panels of Ember 1, the half-built gunship Kieran had been secretly preparing beneath the canyon walls. Hundreds of signals appeared all at once, and then one massive shadow fell across the ridge. A single ship, dark and enormous, eclipsed the sun as it descended from orbit. It was the size of a city, shaped like a crown of obsidian steel and blood-colored plating. The Judicator's mantle, an imperial warship reserved only for the Empire's most dangerous enemies, and on its bridge stood the one person Kieran had always feared would come, Empress Kelaira. Her voice came through every channel, cold and sharp. "Return the creature. Return what was never yours to keep." Kieran didn't reply. He simply looked at Theon. The dragon's wings flexed slightly, the scars of old battles glowing with faint blue heat beneath the gold-lined armor of his skin. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Kieran climbed into Ember 1. The ship groaned as it lifted from the ground, its engines patched together from a dozen wrecks, its systems barely stable, but it flew. Above him, Theon rose into the air, soaring beside the ship like a living storm. The sky turned red again, not from the setting sun, but from the arrival of the Empire's fleet. Dozens of ships now surrounded the canyon, circling, like vultures armed and ready. They didn't wait this time. Missiles launched. Drones swarmed. Beams of plasma sliced through the clouds. Kieran rolled the ship to the side, diving low as Theon spun through the chaos. The dragon was faster now, more controlled. He fought not like a wild beast, but like a warrior who had made peace with his pain. Fire poured from his mouth, not uncontrolled rage, but precise blasts. He melted drone wings and tore through the hulls of small fighters with claws that sparked, like lightning. Kieran used Ember 1's modified weapons to disrupt the larger ships. He looped between blasts, dodging with every trick he'd learned from a life of surviving broken systems. But this was no skirmish, it was war. And in its center, Theon fought without fear. One ship after another fell, some crashing into the rocks, others disintegrating in the air. Still, more kept coming. Theon faltered once, hit by a wide-beam disruptor that tore through his side. He dropped, but Kieran was there. Ember 1 dove beneath him, pushing power to the stabilizers, guiding him just enough to stop the fall. Theon roared and rose again, his eyes burning bright. The final blow came not from above, but from within. Kieran pushed Ember 1 toward the Empire's flagship, dodging turret fire as he activated a virus program he had spent weeks coding. He landed the ship onto one of the lower hangar pylons and sprinted through smoke-filled corridors. He reached the core terminal, slammed the drive into the control unit, and watched as thousands of locked files were released. Blueprints, lab reports, mission logs. Everything the Empire had done to creatures like Theon. Everything they had buried. Outside, Theon tore through the last of the defense ships, his breath igniting the sky. When Kieran gave the signal, the dragon dove toward the mantle. His body collided with the main power conduit of the warship. The explosion shook the canyon below. Fire rolled through the clouds, turning the horizon orange. Kieran barely made it out, diving back into Ember 1 as the flagship fell in pieces. They escaped into the night. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy shifted. The footage leaked across. Systems, Theon rising into the sky, roaring over the wreckage of the Empire's pride. A single line from Kieran's broadcast repeated everywhere. He wasn't built to obey. He was born to choose. Worlds once quiet with fear began to stir. Resistance groups used Theon's image not as a threat, but as a symbol. His wings meant freedom. His fire meant defiance. Kieran and Theon didn't stay in one place. They moved from system to system, not to hide, but to help. Wherever chains still held, they returned to break them. They never called themselves heroes. They didn't need to. They had become something greater, proof that even the most powerful machine of control could be undone by a single choice, by a bond that couldn't be programmed, by fire that answered to no master. The blaze that chose its own path now lit the way for others. And across the stars, wherever hope had been lost, people looked up and waited for wings in the sky.